You've been campaigning for a while. What do you feel like voters should know about you that they don't already from kind of what you've been putting out?
I've consistently been a voice for Ohio, and working class people. I think there's, one through line throughout my career, and that's been, I've always been fighting for my district and the state, and have taken on, my own party and kind of got the scars to prove it. I ran against Nancy Pelosi for a leadership position. I don't know if a lot of people know that. And she, by all accounts, was the most powerful Democrat in the whole country. And I, took her on head to head in front of all of my colleagues, had to give a speech in front of my caucus with her sitting there, had to be very publicly against her. And, I think if most people knew that, they'd say, that's pretty gutsy for somebody to do that. And that must mean that they were seeing something that the Democrats weren't doing that they needed to be doing for working people. And Tim had the guts to do it. I think that says a lot about what my view of leadership is.
That kind of leads me into my next question.
I'm here to help you. You know what I mean? I'll keep piecing this together.
I appreciate it.
Timmy, awesome, man. Thank you.
Thank you.
What do you feel like at this point the strengths and weaknesses of the Democratic Party are?
I think one of the strengths is that I think there's people in the party who know that there's an issue with us not connecting to average people. I think there's an understanding that that's a problem. And the weakness is that just there's not a clear story. There's not a clear message of what Democrats want to do and who do they want to do it for. There's no big vision for the party. There's no for the country, really. I mean, I think the political party that has a big, bold, exciting vision for the country is the party that's going to benefit, politically. And I don't think we have that. I think that's I don't think the Republicans have it either. Let's make no mistakes about it. But I think that's probably the weakness that we have.
Something we're hearing a lot about on the campaign trail is the economy, inflation. I mean, gas prices are going down some, but people are still concerned about it. What are sort of the key things that you think need to happen to help lower costs and help people just kind of afford their day to day and find joy?
Tax cut. I've been screaming from the mountaintop, we need a tax cut for people. We need to put money in their pocket. We're not going to solve inflation in the short term unless, things need to shake out. It's a global phenomenon. People are getting crushed. It's going to take some time. I just think people didn't do anything wrong. We should put some money in their pocket to help them, reduce some of this burden while we do the CHIPS Act, while we do the infrastructure, while we bring supply chains back and manufacturing back. That's mid to long term. Short term needs to be a tax cut. Needs to be, an increase in production for natural gas so that we can lower costs here for people. And we can move, we can continue to move to a clean economy, but also, reduce costs for people because people are getting hurt. And I just think you got to admit it. You can't pretend like it's not happening. Right? To me, a tax cut's the best way to do that.
You've done some of this in Congress already, but as a senator, what do you feel like you need to do to continue encouraging jobs and developments like the Intel project to?
Yeah, I think that needs one is energy. I think we've got to, I think go all in on, all of the above in some sense. We've got to, continue to do the manufacturing piece on what we're building the clean technology of the future. But we also need to go all in on natural gas, which I think can create hundreds of thousands of jobs in the country. So that energy piece is good because that'll reduce manufacturing costs by reducing energy costs. And then continue on the industrial policy stuff. So the magic of the CHIPS Act was that it was our first step towards a real industrial policy, saying, okay, if you're going to build this stuff here, national security ramifications, manufacturing ramifications, new technology ramifications, we want this in the United States, and we're willing to put $55 billion on the table to help bring companies here. That's just for like chips. So how do we do that same thing for artificial intelligence? How do we do that same thing for pharmaceuticals? How do we do that same thing for moving, other areas? So to me, continuing to build out a real industrial policy in the country is going to be key.
Another hot topic for this cycle has been abortion. Now that we're in a post-obs world, to what extent do you think the federal government should be involved in abortion policy? And, is this going to be something that factors in for you if you're a senator and, down the line trying to confirm Supreme Court justices,
absolutely.
that kind of thing?
This is the first time the Supreme Court has taken away a right. We've always been a country of expanding rights. And so, I think the easiest thing to do is just codify Roe v. Wade into law through the Women's Health Protection Act. We passed it out of the House, couldn't get it through the Senate. That to me is going to be an issue because you have extremists on this issue like JD Vance. I mean, these are very extreme positions, calling rape inconvenient, forcing somebody who's been raped to bring the baby to term. Like that to me is, and then to be for a national abortion ban. So all these stories we hear in your paper and other papers on women having a problem, can't get an Ohio medical professional to help them. They've got to go to Illinois, they've got to go to Indiana, wherever. If you have a national ban, these people are going to have to go to Canada. Like, that's in a very extreme position. Let's just go back to Roe v. Wade. We had settled law for 50 years. There wasn't chaos. Let's just go back to that.
Also on the healthcare front, not just women's healthcare, something I've noticed is that it's, doesn't seem as hot of a topic as it used to be back when the Affordable Care Act was going through. Not as much of a campaign topic, but, in 2022, what do you feel like the government needs to be focusing on now to make healthcare more affordable, to lower prescription drug prices, that kind of thing?
Yeah, do what we started to do in the inflation bill. We were only able to do it through Medicare with insulin and prescription drugs. We should try to do that across the board with insulin and capping insulin costs and making prescription drugs more affordable. I think that's going to be key. I always felt like a public option for people to be able to get into or buy into the Medicare program. Like, we can talk about how to do that, but buying into some public option to compete with the private sector, so that people have a place to go where they can get reasonable health care at a reasonable cost. We're the wealthiest country in the world. Our healthcare system is broken. I hope too that we can start having a conversation about health and not just health care. We've got very much a disease management system where we wait for people to get really sick and then we spend a lot of money taking care of them. How do we front load that and really start helping people stay healthy in our schools, through our the way our businesses cover health, really front load it towards prevention, to me would save a boatload of money, and that to me would be the way to go about it.
And you're still not on board with Medicare for all, right?
No.
Another thing that got addressed some in the Inflation Reduction Act was climate change. What do you think is next on that front?
I hope the next big step is this permitting bill and a big push, towards natural gas. And that, to me, we had from 2015 to 2019 the largest reduction in carbon of any country was the United States, because we had natural gas that displaced coal. And right now, Europe is going on to coal more now because of what's going on with Russia. China's building one coal-fired power plant a week. And so if we can, get these projects done. And a lot of these projects that are getting gummed up because the bureaucracy of the government is so terrible they're wind projects, they're solar projects. Only like 20% of them are actual like fossil fuel type projects. So we have a broken government, and this is what I'm trying like to get people to understand. Like, this isn't a Democrat or Republican thing. It's like our government needs modernized. We need an era of reform. Like, we have this big, bloated, industrial age government that isn't working for people. And so now we have got all these energy projects, right? We want to dominate the future. And like, we can't get permits. It takes 6 years. Like, that's not how we're gonna roll. And so we need an era of reform if we're gonna dominate the clean tech industries of the future. But it's gotta be pragmatic, and it's gonna take both parties to make happen, so.
I know the answer to this, I think, but do you believe Biden was legitimately elected in 2020?
I do. I do, and I think that anybody who is trying to call that into question is trying to undermine our democracy. I just, for a lot of people who know better, that there's been no evidence. All of the, just however many Trump judges themselves that he appointed are saying, no, this is garbage. It's undermining our democracy. And I think, a guy like JD Vance, like this smart guy, he went to Yale, he's got a Yale law degree. He knows better. You can't have that.
The poll that we just conducted and some others that I've seen too, threats to democracy, like you just alluded to, are, at the top of the list for people. I guess for you, is from where you stand, what do you feel like are the biggest threats, if any, to our democracy at this point? Is it the election rhetoric? Is it something else?
Well, I think the biggest threat will be, if the exhausted majority is too tired to get engaged, too exhausted to get engaged, too fatigued to get engaged. I think that's the threat. Good people doing nothing, or good people sitting on the sidelines. This is a small group of people that are doing this. It's not a majority. It's not even anywhere close to majority. It's probably not even a majority of Republicans that actually are full-throated into this stuff. And so the question's really going to be, will good people stand up and try to make a difference? Regardless of party. Like, people, it can't be like these questions are too big to say, I can't vote for a Democrat because X, Y. No, this guy says that the election was stolen, and it wasn't. And that's pretty fundamental, right? So to me, there are things that are higher than party, and that's preserving the democracy, preserving the country.
The senator you're hoping to replace has often been known for sort of, his bipartisan work, like the infrastructure bill, for example. We know things are very polarized right now. Are there issues where you feel like you can reach consensus with the other side if you're elected?
Yeah, I hope so. You got to really dig in and get there to find out. I would just ask people to look at my record, the last two Congresses, in the top 10% of the most bipartisan people in the country in Congress. Top 1 or 2 in Ohio for the last few years as well. So the question is, are you willing to find common ground or not? I am. I don't want to hate anybody. I don't need to unnecessarily get in a fight with anybody. So people should know that, there are probably a lot of issues. I think, big investments into joint vocational schools, bringing back shop class, those should be very bipartisan issues. The natural gas issue, I'm very disappointed in what I'm hearing coming out of the Republicans on the permitting bill. That should absolutely be a bipartisan bill. So those would be two, right out of the chute, I would hope that we could figure out.
You've talked a lot about China on the campaign trail, and as a result, you've gotten some criticism from the Asian American community. I know you held a town hall around here with some folks. Have you, I guess what have been, as you've talked to people in the wake of those ads, what have been kind of your takeaways from those conversations, and have any of those concerns kind of informed how you've continued to approach the issue?
Yeah, I mean, we are trying to be very, very clear, more so after those conversations, but just very clear. We are talking about the communist Chinese government, and that we are asking, and I am asking, Asian Americans to be a part. They're Americans, they're American citizens, so they are part of us taking on China. They know better than most what China is doing, so they are a part of the big competition that we need to win, and so we just really want to be very, very clear on that.
Yeah. All right, last question.
Yeah.
You're campaigning for the so-called exhausted majority, trying to appeal to moderates. At the same time, your critics are quick to point out that you have a 100% voting record with Biden. So, I mean, how do you persuade voters that, while you're saying one thing on the campaign trail, you're not just going to get to the U.S. Senate and vote with Democratic interests?
Well, I tell them, look, I ran against Nancy Pelosi. I've gotten in fights on the stage with Bernie Sanders. I've been very public with my disagreements with President Obama and Biden during their trade issues with TPP and Fast Track and all of those. Very, very public in my votes against them and my comments against them and my remarks against them. So I think people should know that. And then I think the question is, what are we voting on here? Like the CHIPS Act, that landed Intel, the infrastructure bill that's going to create 600,000 jobs, the rescue package that saved 100,000 pensions in Ohio. What of these bills does JD Vance want me not to vote for? Because if he voted for them, he's voting against Teamsters retirements, he's voting against union construction jobs in the state, he's voting against the Intel project. So the question to me is, what of those do you want me to vote against? Because those are all good for Ohio. Not just because I have the guts to tell Biden I'm not for a student loan thing, or don't agree what he's doing on the border, or I don't agree on X, Y, or Z. Doesn't mean that if he's doing something good, I'm not going to support it. It's the same reason I supported Trump when he renegotiated NAFTA and took on China. It was best for Ohio. And so I just want the picture to be crystal clear here. My whole career has been about Ohio and workers here. And sometimes I get in fights with Democrats, and sometimes I get in fights with Republicans, but everybody knows where I stand. And so, those are good things for our state, so of course I'm going to be for them.
All right. Good
Cool.
deal. Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jordan.